Master Sergeant Raul Perez Roy Benavidez, August 5, 1935, November 29, 1998, was a United States Army soldier who was awarded the Medal of Honor for his valorous actions in combat near LC-9, South Vietnam on May 2, 1968, while serving as a member of the United States Army Special Forces during the Vietnam War. Roy P. Benavidez was born in Lindenau near Curo, Texas, in DeWitt County. He is a descendant of the founders of Benavides, Texas, and was the son of a Mexican farmer, Salvador Benavidez Jr., and a Yaqui mother, Teresa Perez. When he was 2 years old, his father died of tuberculosis and his mother remarried. 5 years later, his mother died from tuberculosis as well. Benavidez and his younger brother Roger moved to El Campo, where their grandfather, uncle and aunt raised them along with 8 cousins. Benavidez shined shoes at the local bus station, labored on farms in Texas, New Mexico, and Colorado, and worked at a tire shop in El Campo. He dropped out of school at age 15 in order to work full-time to help support the family. Benavidez returned to Fort Bragg and began training for the elite Army Special Forces. Once qualified and accepted, he became a member of the 5th Special Forces Group and the Studies and Observations Group SOG. In 1965, he was sent to South Vietnam as a Special Forces advisor to an Army of the Republic of Vietnam infantry regiment. During his tour of duty, he went on a solo reconnaissance mission to gather intel on the enemy troops. It was at this moment that he stepped on a landmine during a patrol and was evacuated to the United States. Doctors at Fort Sam Houston concluded he would never walk again and began preparing his medical discharge papers. As Benavidez noted in his Mo acceptance speech in 1981, stoked by the diagnosis, as well as flag burnings and media criticism of the US military presence in Vietnam he saw on TV, he began an unsanctioned nightly training ritual in an attempt to redevelop his ability to walk. Getting out of bed at night against doctors' orders, Benavidez would crawl using his elbows and chin to a wall near his bedside, and with the encouragement of his fellow patients, many of whom were permanently paralyzed and or missing limbs, he would prop himself against the wall and attempt to lift himself unaided, starting by wiggling his toes, then his feet, and then eventually after several months of excruciating practice that, by his own admission, often left him in tears pushing himself up the wall with his ankles and legs. After over a year of hospitalization, Benavidez walked out of the hospital in July 1966 with his wife at his side, determined to return to combat in Vietnam. Despite continuing pain from his wounds, he returned to South Vietnam in January 1968. 6 hours in hell. The sun was barely rising over the tree line of the Cambodian jungle on May 2, 1968. When a crackle broke over the radio at LOC-9, a forward operating base near the Vietnam-Cambodia border. A 12-man Special Forces recon team codenamed Team Spike was surrounded. They had been ambushed by a full North Vietnamese Army battalion, heavily armed and strategically entrenched. The voice on the radio was strained, panicked, barely audible through the static. They needed help. Benavidez, a Green Beret Master Sergeant with the 5th Special Forces Group, heard the call from across the compound. He had spent years preparing for moments like this: jungle warfare, tactical rescue, survival behind enemy lines, but this wasn't his mission. He wasn't even on the duty roster that day. His knees were still recovering from an earlier mine injury. He had no orders, no direct link to the team, but those were his brothers. Without hesitation, Roy grabbed his medical bag, his knife, and his M16. He didn't bother with full gear or body armor, there wasn't time. He ran to the helipad and leapt into the nearest A-1 Huey helicopter. No one stopped him. No one needed to ask why. The helicopter approached the landing zone, but the terrain below wasn't a battlefield, it was a massacre. Smoke drifted like ghosts through shattered trees. Bodies, American and Vietnamese, lay scattered. Bullets sliced through the canopy. The pilot couldn't land, the fire was too intense. So Benavidez jumped. He hit the ground running, zigzagging through gunfire. He reached the team's position, 6 already dead, 4 critically wounded, the rest barely holding on. Their radioman had been shot. Their leader was unconscious. Benavidez didn't flinch. He moved like a ghost between the trees, pulling wounded men to cover, throwing grenades to keep enemy soldiers at bay, administering morphine with one hand while firing his rifle with the other. He was shot in the leg. He kept moving. He was hit again, in the face and head with shrapnel. He wiped the blood from his eyes and kept pulling bodies to safety. A second Huey came in low for extraction. Benavidez ran through open ground under withering fire to guide the chopper in. He loaded the wounded, then turned back. There were more men still out there. He sprinted into the jungle again, dragging the limp body of the team leader. On the way, he killed 2 enemy soldiers with his knife. One bayoneted him in the ribs. He killed that one too. His vision was narrowing, his lungs filling with blood. But he refused to die. Not yet. By the time Roy Benavidez reached the last helicopter with the final survivors, he had been shot 7 times, bayoneted in the side, struck by shrapnel, clubbed with a rifle, and had teeth knocked out from a rifle butt to the face. He collapsed on the chopper floor, drenched in blood, his own and others. The flight medic checked his pulse. Nothing. Benavidez was zipped into a body bag. Just before the bag closed completely, he spit in the doctor's face. It was the only thing he could do. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. But that glob of blood and saliva was enough. "I'm not dead yet," it said. "Don't you dare leave me here." Benavidez survived. Barely. He spent a year in the hospital, undergoing multiple surgeries. At times, doctors said he wouldn't walk again. They were wrong. At times, they said he might never speak again. Also wrong. He returned to military service, this time training new Green Berets. His story became legend. In 1981, President Ronald Reagan awarded Roy the Medal of Honor. As he read the official citation describing how Roy saved at least 8 lives single-handedly, fought through over 6 hours of combat, and refused to quit, Reagan paused, looked up, and said, "If the story of Roy Benavidez were a movie script, you wouldn't believe it." Benavidez wasn't supposed to live past that mission. He wasn't even supposed to be in that jungle. But something inside him, something fierce, unbreakable, refused to let his brothers die alone. He never called himself a hero. In fact, he used his fame to speak out for veterans, for the wounded, for those still fighting invisible battles long after the war ended. He died in 1998, buried in Texas with full military honors. His gravestone reads, "Master Sergeant Roy P. Benavidez, Medal of Honor recipient, a true American hero." But those who knew him would tell you, he was more than that. He was the man who jumped into hell with nothing but a medkit and a prayer and walked out with the souls of his brothers on his back.